Week 7. The Notice. Galway Workhouse, January 1848. Winter settled heavily over Galway. Frost whitened the exercise yard each morning, turning the hard ground silver before hundreds of worn shoes trampled it into grey slush. The cold found every crack in the old building, creeping beneath doors and through broken window frames until the girls learned to sleep curled tightly together beneath their blankets. Hunger had become an old acquaintance. Cold was newer, and somehow crueler. Despite the weather, people continued to arrive. The porter at the gate remarked one morning that the admissions ledger seemed to grow heavier every week. The departures ledger was heavier still. Some left through the front gate, many left through the burial ground. Maureen had now lived in the workhouse for nearly 3 months. The terror of her first days had faded into something quieter. She knew where the warmest corner of the laundry could be found. She knew which kitchen women might quietly scrape an extra spoonful into a bowl if enough food remained. She knew which older girls to avoid and which to trust. She knew to keep her head lowered when Collins, the assistant porter, passed through the corridors. He had never spoken to her again after that evening, but she noticed him watching, always watching. She had taken Ellen's advice to heart. She was never alone if she could help it. Nora had become almost another sister, not a replacement. No one could ever replace Patricia. But someone who laughed with her, someone who reminded her that conversation could exist without sorrow. One evening, while sorting linen together, Nora smiled. "You're taller. I am not. You are. I'm exactly the same." Nora held her hand above Maureen's head. "You've grown at least an inch." Maureen laughed. "Then perhaps I'll soon be old enough to tell you what to do." "I should like to see you try." It was such an ordinary exchange, the sort sisters might have shared in happier times, and for a few moments they were simply two girls teasing one another. Not famine survivors, not workhouse inmates, just girls. The following Monday brought an unusual stir throughout the building. The master of the workhouse himself appeared in the women's yard, accompanied by 2 gentlemen dressed in dark coats. Mrs. Hanley stood beside them. Even she seemed unusually formal. The bell was rung. Every girl above the age of 12 was assembled. Whispers passed rapidly through the crowd. "What's happened? Has someone important come? Are they inspectors?" Nobody knew. The master unfolded a sheet of paper. His voice echoed across the yard. "I've received official correspondence concerning a government immigration scheme." A murmur spread through the girls. He continued, "Under the direction of Earl Grey, Secretary of State for the Colonies, orphan girls of suitable character may apply for assisted passage to the colony of New South Wales." No one spoke. Most scarcely understood. Australia sounded less like a place than a story. The master continued reading. "Applicants shall generally be between 14 and 18 years of age." Maureen felt her stomach tighten. 13. She was still only 13. "They must be orphans." That much she was. "Of good health," she believed she was, "and of good moral character." The words seemed simple enough, yet several older girls exchanged uneasy glances. When the announcement ended, the yard exploded into conversation. "Australia? Where is it? I heard it's hotter than Spain. My cousin says everyone there is a prisoner." "No, they're looking for servants. I heard they're looking for wives. They say you'll never see Ireland again." That last sentence silenced more than one conversation. That evening, the orphan ward buzzed with excitement. Some girls dismissed the whole scheme. "They'll never choose us." Others spoke of nothing else. "It has to be better than this. It couldn't be worse. Imagine having your own room. Imagine eating every day." The dreams grew larger as the evening wore on, and no one mentioned the fear that accompanied them. Maureen found Nora sitting by the window. "What are you thinking?" Nora smiled faintly. "I'm trying to imagine Australia." "What do you see?" "I don't know." She laughed softly. "I suppose I imagine somewhere with sunshine. No workhouses. No fever wards. No funerals every week. No bells." Maureen sat beside her. "I'd settle for that." Ellen joined them. "Are you both applying?" "If they'll have me," Nora answered. Ellen nodded. "I shall." She looked towards Maureen. "And you?" Maureen hesitated. "I'm too young." Nora turned quickly. "How old are you?" 13. "When's your birthday?" "In March." Nora thought for a moment. "Does anyone here know that?" Maureen frowned. "The admission book, perhaps. But do you know your exact birthday?" Maureen shook her head. Father always said it was sometimes before St. David's Day. Nora smiled knowingly. So? She leaned closer. Many of us don't know our exact birthdays. My mother wasn't keeping parish records. Ellen suddenly understood. You could say you're 14. Maureen stared at them. I couldn't. Why not? Because it isn't true. Nora took her hand. Listen to me. Her voice became serious. If you stay here another year... She looked around the crowded dormitory. What future do you have? Maureen said nothing. You can read. You're healthy. You work hard. You're exactly the sort of girl they're looking for. But I'm 13. Nora smiled gently. And if you tell them that... She let the last sentence remain unfinished. For the first time since arriving at the workhouse, Maureen found herself thinking about tomorrow instead of today. Australia. The word itself felt impossible. She'd never seen Dublin, never seen Cork, never seen England. Now people spoke of a place on the opposite side of the world. It was terrifying. Yet somehow, hope usually was. The following week, the official notices were posted. Every orphan girl gathered round the board in the main corridor. The notice was neatly written in careful script. Applicants for the Earl Grey emigration scheme were to present themselves for registration. Selection would include medical examination, interview, assessment of industry, assessment of literacy, assessment of moral character, final approval by the emigration commissioners. Girls failing any stage would not be considered. Maureen read every word twice, then a third time. Beside her, Nora quietly whispered, "This is our chance." Maureen looked at her. No, she corrected herself, not a chance, a test. One that would judge every part of them, not simply whether they were healthy, but whether they were worthy. As they walked away from the notice board, neither girl noticed Collins standing at the end of the corridor. He watched the gathering with quiet interest. His eyes rested briefly upon Nora, then upon Maureen. Finally, he smiled to himself before turning away. It was a smile that carried no warmth at all, and though neither girl knew it yet, the hardest examinations would not all take place before the commissioners. Some judgments had already begun. Week 8. Worthy. Galway Workhouse, February 1848. Once the notice had been posted, the atmosphere inside the orphan ward changed completely. For months, the girls had endured each day without expecting anything to be different from the one before it. Now suddenly, there was something beyond the walls, something beyond the bell, something beyond the workhouse itself. Australia. The very word carried an almost magical quality. Few of the girls could point to it on a map. Many had not even heard of it before the announcement. But everyone understood one thing. It was somewhere else. And somewhere else had become the greatest dream any of them possessed. Within days, every conversation seemed to return to the same subject. I heard they grow oranges. I heard there are snakes longer than a horse. I heard servants are paid wages. I heard every woman gets her own cottage. Most of the rumours contradicted one another. Nobody minded. The truth scarcely mattered. Hope had become more nourishing than the workhouse porridge. Mrs. Hanley gathered the eligible girls one afternoon. There were more applicants than places. The room immediately fell silent. She looked carefully around the faces before her. You should understand that being an orphan is only the beginning. She lifted a piece of paper. The commissioners seek girls who are healthy. She glanced down. Industrious. Another glance. Obedient. Then finally, and of unquestioned moral character. The final words seemed to hang in the room. Several girls looked uneasily at one another. Mrs. Hanley continued, "Everything about your conduct from this day forward will be observed." No one doubted her. The workhouse seemed to become more disciplined overnight. Girls who had once grumbled while scrubbing floors now worked in silence. Arguments became rare. Everyone knew that someone was watching, whether it was the matron, the master, the schoolmistress, or another official whose report might one day determine their future. Every kindness occasionally became suspect. Some girls suddenly volunteered for extra duties. Others began quoting scripture more often than usual. An older orphan remarked quietly, "We're all trying to look like saints." Ellen smiled. "We've only just noticed." Maureen continued attending Mrs. Walsh's lessons whenever work permitted. Reading now took on new importance. One afternoon Miss Walsh placed a short passage before her. "Read." Maureen did so without hesitation. The teacher nodded approvingly. "Again?" She read it a second time. You've improved. My father always said reading opened doors. Mrs. Walsh smiled sadly. Perhaps his words will prove truer than either of you imagined. Later that week, Mrs. Hanley summoned Maureen to her office. The girl entered nervously. You wish to see me? I did. The matron removed a pair of spectacles. How old are you? The question struck like a hammer. Maureen hesitated. She thought of her father. She thought of Nora. She thought of the notice on the wall. Finally, she answered, 14. Mrs. Hanley studied her face for several moments, long enough that Maureen feared the lie had already failed. Instead, the matron merely nodded and wrote something in her ledger. You read well. Yes, ma'am. You work hard. I try. I know. She closed the book. You'll be entered among the applicants. Maureen thanked her and quietly left. Only when she reached the corridor did she realize her hands were trembling. That evening she confessed everything to Nora. I lied. Nora smiled. You survived. I don't like it. I know. My father always said the truth mattered. Nora nodded. It does. Then how can this be right? The older girl considered the question carefully, and finally she answered, because the famine has made honest people choose between two truths. Maureen frowned. I don't understand. You told a lie? Yes, but the greater truth is that you're exactly the sort of girl they're hoping to save. She gently squeezed Maureen's hands. If they'd waited another few months, she smiled, you'd have been 14 anyway. Maureen looked unconvinced. I still feel guilty. You should. Maureen blinked. What? Nora laughed softly. If you didn't feel guilty, I'd worry about you. As the weeks passed, preparations quietly began. Applicants underwent extra literacy lessons. Their sewing was inspected, their behaviour carefully recorded. Every posture seemed suddenly important. Girls practiced curtsying, practiced answering questions politely, practiced introducing themselves. One afternoon, Ellen whispered, They're teaching us to become servants. Nora smiled. Better servants than corpses. No one argued with that. Yet beneath the excitement ran an undercurrent of fear. Not everyone wanted the girls to leave, and one evening Maureen again found Colin standing near the laundry corridor. He smiled pleasantly. So? She stopped. I hear you're applying. She said nothing. Australia. He chuckled. A long way from Galway. She nodded cautiously. I've heard. I wonder. He leaned slightly closer, whether they'll ask about you. Maureen frowned. What do you mean? Oh. He smiled innocently. They'll want references. I'm sure they will. They'll ask whether you're obedient. I am. Whether you're honest. She felt the words strike home. He watched her expression carefully, then smiled once more. Good luck. He walked away. Maureen remained standing where she was. For reasons she couldn't explain, the conversation frightened her far more than it should have. She told Nora about it that evening. The older girl's expression became serious. Stay away from him. I do. I mean completely. He never touches anyone. No, but he listens. She lowered her voice. And he talks. What do you mean? If someone wishes to hurt a girl's chances... She glanced around before continuing. They don't always need proof. The words chilled Maureen. You think he'd do that? I think some people enjoy reminding orphans how powerless they are. That night, as snow drifted quietly beyond the dormitory windows, Maureen lay awake, listening to the breathing of the girls around her. Some dreamed aloud, some whispered prayers, some quietly cried into their blankets. She wondered how many of them would still be here by summer, how many would sail halfway around the world, how many would simply disappear into Ireland's endless suffering. Across the room, Nora was already asleep. Her face seemed peaceful for the first time in weeks. Maureen smiled. She hoped more than anything that they would stand together when the selections were made. Neither girl knew that while one application was growing stronger with every passing day, the other was quietly beginning to unravel. Not because of anything Nora had done, but because in the world beyond childhood a girl's reputation could be destroyed by nothing more than a whisper.